to have everybody here tonight. Inside where it's dry. I don't know if it started raining out there yet or not, but it sounds like it's coming this way. So let me turn on my light here because it's a little dark up here. I'm going to talk tonight about being present and two types of being present that we'll get to as we go further into this. Used to be that when you were in school, and they may not do this anymore because I think now you get multiple chances to get your picture taken, but when you weren't there for picture day on that one day, if you just happened to be sick or you were off somewhere, they'd put some silly picture in your place in the yearbook, and that's how you were going to be remembered from that point forward in the yearbook. They were no makeup days, especially when I was a kid. They'd always warn you, get up here for this picture because there's absolutely no chance to make it up. And they would put in a little silly picture of you or a little silly graphic for you if you weren't there. And if you were sick, sometimes it said something else like sick on picture day. So everybody would remember why you weren't there for that also. But for us as Christians, and when we're talking about faith, we don't just get one shot. We don't just get one chance. We have many chances. We have many opportunities as long as we have this physical life to come forward and embrace the faith, to learn more about what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to live, to follow God, to follow Christ. You know, we sit here in this community, and when you think about it, 45 years ago this month was the first service in this building as the Hickory Ridge Church of Christ. So that was in May of 1981. So all these years here on this corner, several times a week, people have been able to have the opportunity to come in here and hear scriptural lessons from the Bible. And they've had that opportunity several times a week. And whether they choose to do that or choose not to do that or just ignore us as they drive by, that is their choice. That is up to them. And in those 45 years, we've seen a lot of people come and go from this building, from this work. And we've also been able to help out and a lot of other, people, and especially those that we mention from time to time that we send money to, supporting different works as we can per what it says in the Bible. So we've made an impact here, hopefully, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. And when people drive by and see that we're present, it's at least a sign to them that there's something going on in that building. They drive by and they see these lights on, and they know we're here. They know we're here on Super Bowl Sunday. They drive by if they happen to be out, and we're still here. You know, we've been up here on major holidays and everything else when other people may not have been here. And the only time we ever had a run of times that we were not up here was during just the few weeks that were the highest part of COVID, where we didn't gather at that time just because we didn't know what was going to happen. Also, you can follow along with this service online. It's streaming live right now on YouTube. We record it. There's a podcast. You can put it in your phone and you can follow. You can hear back different lessons like that. So we make it very easy to come and to hear these messages. We make it very easy to hear the teaching that's happening here. And the idea here, the first idea of being present is to be present in body. And showing up still matters. I think that's the first key point of all of this. You know, when we think about Christians who've went on before us, those who were worshiping long before when this service or this congregation started meeting in 1981, we've only had automobiles and the ability to easily get to a church service for around a little over 100 years. So before that, many Christians either had to walk on foot or ride on horseback. And I was looking at just the distance between my house and here. If I was walking on foot or riding a horse to get over here, it would take about 2 hours to do so each way. And some of you take a lot longer than that. And luckily, we had Christians that were willing to do that for so many years. They were willing to make it a priority to come together and worship when it was a lot harder to do so. And to them, showing up definitely mattered. They made the effort. They made the sacrifice in order to do that because they knew what they were doing was the right thing to do. Now, even on foot, it would take a good 2 hours with the modern roads that we have. So think how long it would take somebody in the 1800s to travel just across Lebanon to get to a church service when you didn't have paved roads, you didn't have good paths to do it. So a lot of people made the effort to do things when it was very difficult to do so. And I think that makes it a little more surprising when you see people who won't make the effort today when it's just so easy. It's just so easy to attend a church service. So there's a lot of reasons why they don't. And we'll get into some of those as we go on. But also in 2026, it's very easy to live a life without interacting with people. And I think we see that more and more and more. And you think even 20 years ago, it was not like it is now. We've seen such a big, gigantic shift in our culture. And going back to COVID, I think once COVID happened, a lot of people sort of went further into their shells and they don't want to come out. And we have a whole generation of kids that were in school at that time that saw what it was like to not have to go to school, not have to be present anymore. And a lot of people really identified with that. And that's some would say that some in the culture are sort of stuck there. They're sort of stuck there. We can buy groceries and we don't even have to see the inside of the store anymore. We just pull up and they'll pop them in the trunk for us, which I would say is pretty convenient. But it's a little further step in the fact that we are living more and more isolated lives. I worked from home for a number of years. My last boss at the old company, who was my boss for 4 years, never was in the same room with him. So I'm on the computer screen, never did meet him in person the whole time that we worked together. Hadn't seen anybody I worked with in about 8 years, actually, those last 8 years, because there was nothing else here in this area and they never traveled here. So there was really no ability to see them. And I think more and more people are getting to that point. They can work at home, they can order things at home. They don't want to get out, they don't want to deal with other people. And you also see that when you notice people who are sort of forced to be out, they work public facing jobs and they really don't know how to deal with other people. I think we're seeing a lot of that now. You see a lot of frustration and road rage when people have to interact with others in any sort of way. The first thing is, I'm so important. I expect every car to get out of my way. I expect everybody to get out of this line. It's all about me, me, and me. And we're developing a culture that is more like that. It's very easy to apply that to our church lives also, to think, I'll just worship God on my own time. I'll read a few verses here. I don't need to continue to attend. I can just do this myself. And I think there are people who are doing that. There is a big difference between surviving your faith and thriving in the faith. And you could say that for really anything that you do. Surviving your education or thriving in your education. Isolated embers die out very quickly. But when you pile it together, you can create a pretty big fire. And you need that. You need that, especially on cold nights. And that's what the church really is. There's an energy to a group of people that come together. And also, we have to not think of church as this weekly obligation that we need to check off the checklist 2 or 3 or maybe just one time a week. I think some people, I've done that one service. I don't need to go back the rest of the week. And I guess we should be thankful they're here for that one service. And, it's hard to say anything about that. And, it's tough when we talk about a topic like this that the people who really need to hear it, they're not here. And we knew they would not be here. And that's why we share these messages. So maybe you can talk to the people in your life who need to hear this, who need to hear why it's important that they're here. How can it benefit them? Why does it matter? I think we get caught up with so much distraction in the world and so much busyness that we let it fall down our list. Well, I have all of this other stuff to do. And I can tell you a lot of that stuff is not going to matter at some point. I have worked with people who have passed away on the job, and They're working and then they're gone and then their desk is cleaned out and then somebody else is in their place a couple of weeks later. The world goes on. A lot of the obligations that we think that we have that will stunt our ability to be somewhere and to do something are very much temporary, and they don't matter in the big scheme of things. Also, there's an idea, and I didn't really know how to phrase it, so I phrased it like this: we are hardwired for encouragement. We need encouragement. In Hebrews 10:24, it says, "And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." It doesn't say come here and just be counted as here. It's not about attendance or logging attendance records. It's about something more than that. You notice it says exhort one another. It's important for the other people that you be here. And exhort means to strongly encourage or earnestly encourage. There's an authentic part to this that we need to think about. If we leave it just to ourselves, if we don't think about our place in this place, the tendency will be that, well, my couch is very comfortable on Sunday mornings. I'll just stay on my nice couch. I'll stay in my nice warm house. I don't have to go out in the heat. I don't have to go out in the cold. This is the one day I don't have to drive. When you're driving back and forth Monday through Friday, well, I don't want to drive on the weekends. I don't want to get out. There's a lot of stuff in the world that can get into your mind that can push you away from this commitment. But when we gather on Wednesdays and Sundays, we kind of counteract that. There's nothing that replaces the interaction that you have with other brothers and sisters in Christ. There's nothing that's going to do it. That's an extra element to what we're doing here. It's not the reason we gather together, but it's a part of why we gather together. When we see others also in the same race we're in, it's a living testimony. It's a living testimony. It's like another sermon. So your presence is vital for the encouragement of others. In 1 Corinthians 12, starting in verse 21, it says, "And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. No, much rather those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary." We're all necessary no matter what role we think we're playing here. Even if we think we have just a small role, we may not know how much our presence might mean to somebody else. In verse 27, it says, "Now you are the body of Christ and members individually." So we all make up the whole. When you stay home, or when you sort of isolate your faith, not only will your faith eventually drift off, because it will, but it also means that this work is missing your part. It's missing your presence. It's not complete because you're not here. Each of us has a special role that is missing when we're not here. Some of us are here to encourage others. Some of us are the people who kind of watch out for things that need to be fixed or repaired. Some of us might be the ones that organize the office or get the mail, or each little piece comes together to make all of this work. And we need to consider that. In Ephesians 4, starting in verse 11, it says, and he gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God. If we don't show up, everybody else feels the loss. Church is not a spectator sport where we simply just sort of sit back and watch. Even if we feel we're not doing whatever, we're still doing something. Even if my primary role is to come here and sit in that blue chair and just say hello to everybody and to be present and to listen along with everybody else, I'm making that group stronger by being here. And another point is gathering together unifies us in faith in contrast to a very divided world. You know, as we stated earlier, in a world that is becoming more lonely, coming together in a group, it stands for something. It means something. I would hate to say that it's becoming more rare, but it seems like it is. It seems like the idea of community is sort of slipping away. You know, we get to the point where we don't know our neighbors. We barely may know even the people we work with, even though we're around them so many hours a week. And the idea of asking questions or wanting to get to know them is somewhat discouraged because you don't know exactly what they're thinking or how, what kind of people they are. Everything is so stressful at this point in life, it seems like, in 2026. People are always suspicious if you try to be friendly. What are we getting at? So they tend to divide themselves more by what they have in common, such as sort of political views. We see a lot of political division in this country. And it's very easy online to divide yourself into certain very narrow hobbies or social status even, or age groups, and to not mingle or understand the older people, or to have bias against younger people. We see a lot of that going in both ways. In a healthy church, you will see different generations. You will see different age groups, people of different backgrounds coming together. Because it's people of all backgrounds that should be pursuing the faith, should be interested in the truth. Jesus said in John 13:35, it says, "By this all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." I don't think you're going to ever read the word Democrat or Republican in the Bible. I've never seen it. Now, you may find it in some translation. I don't know. Maybe there's some crazy translation out there that adds it in. I don't know. But this is not a place of politics. It's not a place of division. It is a place really to pursue the ideas that are in the Bible. And yes, there are rules, and yes, there are guidelines, and yes, there are things we must follow. But that is because we are trying to get to heaven. We have a goal here, and it's a goal where everybody is at least invited to participate in that goal. Now, they may say, well, no, I don't agree with this, and this, and this in the Bible. That's their decision, and they've done that, and they've excluded themselves from running that race. And if we can help them, we should. And if we can't, we should move on to somebody that we can help, if we have tried over and over and over to do that. And finally, when it comes to being present in the body, are you present for the right reasons? We've talked about this before. My parents didn't go to church. Some people go to church because their parents go to church and they don't want to disappoint their parents. And that's eventually that sort of inauthentic relationship with God may separate them from the church if we're not careful. So we need to think about that. We need to know that we're not here for networking. I know that doesn't happen here. I've told you stories about a friend I had that moved to a bigger church for more networking opportunities and would just flat out tell you that. And we're not here, because we think just a couple hours or an hour or so a week is all it takes to get to heaven. Being a Christian is a full-time deal. It's a full-time job. It's not about 2 hours a week. It's about the 168 hours a week. And who are we going to be? And how are we going to live? We're here because we want to take direct ownership of our relationship with Christ. We want to do something. We want to take action. Now, the second idea tonight is being present in mind. And I have talked a lot about smartphones and technology, and it's, I think those of us of a certain age that, we grew up completely without all of that stuff. We didn't have it when we were kids. We didn't walk right into it. And then we saw this transition happen really in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then we see the world today. It's almost hard for me to describe. I work with a lot of younger people, and the person who sits next to me is 36. My boss is 35, by the way. So I'm one of the oldest people in the department at this point. But and it's an interesting perspective that they have because they've always been a part of this. They've always had this technology. We will talk about certain things, and it blows their minds, the idea that we didn't have a computer in our house. We didn't have an internet. If we had to figure something out, we had to go to the library and look at encyclopedias. It sounds Stone Age, but it really wasn't that long ago. I guess it is kind of getting a little long ago now, but when you think of it overall, it seems like it just happened all of a sudden. And now we let so much information in that all we can really do is just skim things. There's so many things coming at us, so many different ideas and thoughts, and a lot of it is simply garbage and noise. We have to really consider how much garbage am I letting in. I think I've told you before, if I open the TikTok app, which some of you may not know what that is, it's not a breath mint, it's an actual application. And I think that corgis are great. I have a corgi. Well, it shows me a lot of cute corgi videos. It knows what I like, and it will just show me corgi after corgi after corgi. It'll show me cute farm animals and stuff. And if you opened it and after a few minutes, it would start showing you what you like too, because it knows how long you stay on something and watch it. And it knows how fast you go to the next thing. Well, you must not like that. So it trains itself to you. And it wants you to stay there for an hour or more because every third or fourth video, it sneaks in an advertisement for something. And that's how they're making their money. And so we get to that point where everything that we do is we just skim it. We take as little as we can. We get that little hit of interest, or wow, that's cute, and then we're on to the next thing. And we have to be very careful not to skim what happens here. And I know that's difficult too, because we are so tuned into the noise. How do you get rid of the noise? How do you do it? We may be sitting here right now listening to what I'm saying. Luckily, there's nobody kicked back and nodded off tonight. And I've been doing this for a while now, and I have had people, I won't name names, I've looked out at this audience and seen people, they just got gone. They're in another world. And the reason is because I think their lives are just so full of stuff. I can't blame them for being exhausted. So you're finally being forced to sit still and think and not, focus on one thing. And no wonder we're just worn out. We're just worn out. So we're not going to get to heaven by just being present in a room where the Bible is being read or where these lessons are being read. We have to be present in mind. And I didn't know how else to word this, but there is a fight for our focus, and Satan loves distraction. That's really the idea I came up with. Satan loves distraction. He wants you to be distracted. He wants everything fighting for your attention. The best thing a politician loves more than anything else is you not going to vote because you're just sick of it. Because you hear all the arguing. Both sides. None of them are free of this. The more people argue and the more tired you get, the more likely you are to go place your ballot. And who wins? A no vote is the same as a vote. When you don't go to church, or when you do go to church and you're not present in mind and you don't absorb any of what's being said, and you can't share it with others because you only heard beeps and boops of what was being said. A word here and a word there. Of course, when you're driving home, it's already gone. It's already gone from your mind because you couldn't focus. And that's the world we live in today. Focus is getting taken away from us. And we're forgetting how to focus. And I know, like I said, the guy I sit next to is 36. And we were talking about something a few weeks ago. And I said, I honestly can't remember a time when we didn't have these devices. And what did I do when I didn't have them? I don't know how we passed the days. We weren't bored. We had to have done something. But it's hard to remember what life was like. It is hard to remember what life was like in this I will never be bored world that we live in today. I never have to be bored. But I think we are getting to the point in our lives where we realize boredom is actually good for you. Sometimes it's good to just refuel and heal. And I'm not saying that the messages you're going to hear are boring, but what I'm telling you is that there has to be a place where you can turn it all off so then you can come in and listen to one idea. And I think we've forgotten how to listen to one idea because we're so used to trying to listen to 25,000 ideas at once. And the scary thing about these apps is that every time I do my thumb, it's a completely different idea sometimes thrown at me. Maybe it's not all corgi, corgi, corgi. Maybe it's corgi, war in Iran, traffic accident. It's just idea, idea, idea. In my mind, your mind just gets scattered. It just gets scattered with everything. You know, we need to guard the seed. Luke 8:18 in the parable of the sower, it says, therefore take heed how you hear, for whoever has, to him more will be given, and whoever does not have, even what he seems to have, will be taken from him. Notice that Jesus doesn't just say what to listen to. Jesus talks about how we should listen. You know, if we let our minds wander during the preaching of the word or during worship, our hearts become like the wayside in that parable. Jesus said that when the seed falls by the wayside, the devil comes immediately and takes the word from their hearts. It's just wasted. It never gets sown in. It's just laying there to get blown away, or an animal eats it, or whatever happens to it. We don't plow these thoughts into our minds because we're so distracted thinking about everything at once. We have to work in our lives to avoid this faith drifting that can happen by the distractions, or caused by the distractions of this world. Hebrews 2:1 says, we must listen very carefully to the truth we have heard, or we may drift away from it. You know, it's the same thing I was talking about earlier. If you only go to church because your parents went to church and you don't have an anchor and a foundation in that faith, that's very false. And what happens when your parents are no longer here going to church? What do? What happens when you move away and you're somewhere else and you don't have your parents making you get up and go to church, or making you get up and go to class, or making you get up and go to work? I mean, it applies to everything. What do you do when you have the freedom to decide for yourself? And we can go after our younger people for that, but like I've said on Wednesday night, we've seen plenty of older people do the same thing. The anchor in their lives, the faithful anchor in their lives, is gone. And then they stop coming because that person that made sure that was always there, it was their habit, it was what they did, is gone. So now they drift off. So it can happen to any of us, any age. And even if you're sitting in calm water, there's still a drift. There's still an absolute drift. So you may not even see it happening, but it just works its way in little by little. And the current just kind of takes you off. You know, think about how many car accidents happen because you're driving down the road, or someone's driving down the road, and all of a sudden they look to the right and somebody's pulled off the side of the road, and now they're hitting them because their whole car is drifted to, because their focus is now on the right side of the road. And that happens all the time. And our spiritual lives are the same way. Whatever we're focused on is what we're going to drift towards. And if we're not focused on this, even for an hour a week, 2 hours a week, if we're here every service all the time, 3.5, 4 hours a week, what we're focused on those other 160 plus hour a week, engage your eyes and your ears and keep them in the midst of your heart. You engage your heart. You do this when you're singing the songs. Do you actually look at the words? You know, there are people I know, they just hear the song. They never they don't know the words. They sing along with the song, but they don't even know the words. That's possible. A lot of people are like that. And we could do the same thing here. You could hear everything that I'm saying, but not hear any of it. Or maybe I've lost your attention 15 minutes ago. Probably not happening here, but it can happen. It can happen. And I think that's why you see some churches, they resort to, extremely loud guitar solos and in building fireworks. That's a thing, in building fireworks during church services. It's a church over on Old Hickory Boulevard that did that. I know it was in the news one year. They had a 4th of July service. They had in-building fireworks for their 4th of July service. So they're doing everything they can to get you to focus, because I don't think they're there for authentic reasons. They're not there for the right reasons. So they have to do anything they can do to get you to focus on what's being said and what they're doing. So you'll come back and you'll keep donating, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes we can hear just a single verse here, and it's enough to break, some negative thing you might have been going through that day. If you come in here on a Wednesday night, maybe somebody's cut you off. You sat in traffic for 2 hours to get here. It normally takes you an hour. I speak from experience. I think a lot of us have experienced that. You can come in here and you can break that cycle of anxiety or frustration by hearing maybe something you've heard 50 times, depending on how long you've gone to church here, or gone to church, period, or been a Christian. Maybe you've heard it 150 times. But it is enough, when heard again, to break that anxiety, to break that cycle. And that's why it's worth it to be here. Attentiveness equals life. And what we do in this life, we have this very short time to do the work. To do the work. And it's a good thing that we have the time to do it, but we need to think about what is the end goal. And of course, that end goal is heaven. That's why the last idea here is we need to take action. No matter how much time we think we have left, no matter how young or old we are, we don't know how many days we have left. We don't know how many weeks or years we have left. And if we haven't taken action, if we haven't been baptized, if we haven't declared our faith, if we haven't been attending like we should we just say, well, for 57 or 60 years, I wasn't doing it. Why should I start now? I'm at the end of this time, blah, blah, blah. There's so many excuses that can prevent us from doing things. It's never too late, and it's never too early. Either way. I'm certainly not special. My parents didn't go to church. I started going to church with a friend that went to church every Sunday just because I was interested in it when I was in junior high. Because I wanted something different than what I was growing up with in my house. I don't know why. I can't go back and ask 12-year-old Jason why he did that. I don't know. But that led me to standing here in front of you today. I know that. And some of you have similar stories to that. So you can't just say, well, my parents didn't do it or my parents did do it. You have to decide to do it for you. James 1, 22 through 25. We know this. But like I said, we may have heard it 200 times here over the years, but we'll hear it again. And I think it's just as meaningful as the first time you hear it. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. That's a very important, some very important verses there. It talks about doing the work. I think it talks about paying attention to what you're doing. I think it talks about real, authentic faith and not just phoning it in. You know, we need to decide to have a personal faith relationship with Christ. We need to decide to want to know the truth of what's in the Bible. You might not be able to say, I point at the Bible. It's probably hiding behind. You probably wonder if I'm pointing at the fan. I'm not. It's right there. And you notice it's super thick because I had to go to an even bigger print because I could not read. Finally could not read the regular print anymore. But that's what happens as we get older. Hopefully we get older and wiser and we continue in it. And one more note that's not on this PowerPoint is we're not going to be perfect. Nobody is going to be perfect. We talked about that Wednesday night. Nobody up here behind this podium is ever, not a perfect person has ever stood behind this podium in 45 years. I can guarantee that. But it is somebody who wants to do the work and tries to do what is right and tries to learn from their mistakes, pursues heaven, wants to be in heaven, wants to have faith, and wants to believe and be on the right path. And we don't forget what we hear when we mess up. We know we mess up from time to time, and luckily we have Christ because of that, because we're not perfect. We wouldn't need Christ if we were perfect. We have all of these opportunities to be present in body and in mind. And we should take them, or we should urge those we care about to take them while they still have the chance to do it. Because our time to do this is limited. There are a lot of people that were here in May of 1981. They have gone on. They did the work and they have departed. And hopefully at some point, maybe somebody will be standing up here in 45 more years and we'll be part of the departed also. Some of us may still be lingering around here. I'm not sure, but let's hope this work continues. Let's hope it's meaningful. Let's hope it saves people from what could happen if they don't pursue the truth. I hope it's been a good lesson to go through. I know it was beneficial for me to work on it. A lot of the things that I talk to you about come from listening to somebody up here talk or in our classes, and I'll scribble down a sentence every once in a while, and one sentence or two sentences will turn into an entire talk. So, that is another benefit of being here. And we're not going to get that from the couch. We're not going to get that if I decided to go to Walmart while everybody else is in church. There's some people that do that. They go to the grocery store on Sunday mornings because, it's less busy when everybody else is in church. That's quite the thought. But that is what happens. If you have need tonight of the invitation, we offer it every single time we're up here. And also, this is not just a 3 or 4 hour a week service here in this building. There are people here who would be on call 24/7 to help you if that is your time and you decide in the middle of the night. I know there's baptisms that's happened in the middle of the night when a phone call is made. So that is what it takes if you're truly faithful and you want to be a part of the work. If you have the need to ask for prayers of the church, if you need to declare some sort of sin and repent of that publicly, if it's some public sin, all of these things are available while we stand and sing this final song. Have thine own way.